Hey Mama, on today's podcast, we get to hear the birth story of first-time Mama Kathleen, who shares her experience of going from wanting an epidural and feeling unprepared for birth to desiring an unmedicated birth and educating and empowering herself just 2 weeks before the birth of her son. If you want to understand the importance and impact of education and mindset is on your birth, you are going to love Kathleen's story. Education played such a huge role in Kathleen's decision-making for her birth and allowed her to welcome the sensations of birth knowing they were bringing her baby to her. If you want to be empowered through education, the Built to Birth online course is available now for you to build up your mind, your body, and your team for a happier, healthier, and easier birth. You can access this childbirth prep class by going to my website, builttobirth.com, which is linked in the description below. But for now, let's listen to Kathleen's birth story.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for taking time out of a crazy day to chat and let us hear your birth story. I'm so excited.
Of course. I just want to thank you so much because I had to reach out. I was like, I need to find her email somewhere because you helped me so much through my labor and delivery. Oh my gosh, I couldn't have done it without you. Seriously.
Oh, well, I think that's on you because you were the one who was proactive about, getting the information when you did. And so that's on you. And congratulations. Was it your first baby?
It was my first baby, a healthy baby boy. He was born at 7 pounds, 13 ounces, on June 15th. So,
oh my goodness.
He's happy and healthy. And he is
just over a month
right now. Yeah,
okay.
He's just over a month right now. His Nona was like, I'll watch him so that you can take some time and, just go through the podcast because I literally write and rave about you to everybody.
Oh, you're so sweet. Well, I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited to hear about just the impact of educating yourself and finding empowerment and how that impacted your birth experience.
Yeah.
But before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit so we get to know you?
Okay. My name is Kathleen Flo. I live in South Florida. I just moved down here about 4 years ago. I'm originally from Washington State. Me and my husband met about 2 years ago and we had our first baby together. So that's me.
Yay. I love it. Well, I'm so excited, like I said, to have you here on the Built to Birth podcast. And I know all the moms listening are going to fall in love with you and your story. So why don't we just hop into your story now and kind of start with pregnancy a little bit and how you kind of viewed birth before you experienced it for the first time.
So we found out we were pregnant and so excited. We had been trying.
Were you guys planning? Okay.
Yeah, we had been trying for probably about 4 months. And and so we finally found out that we were pregnant. But the thing is I have a heart condition, me personally. Mm-hmm. And so I was always wanting to get that taken care of before getting pregnant because I never knew how that would affect my pregnancy. And so that was a little bit rough in the beginning. We had to go to a high-risk OBGYN for that. And so I was just really scared. And I looked up on Google, which I probably shouldn't have done. It's a heart condition called ventricular tachycardia. So my heart rate just goes double the speed that it's supposed to sometimes. And it said you pretty much can't go and have a C-section. Now I don't know how true this is. But they were like, you can't have a C-section because if you go into the tachycardia in the C-section, then it makes it higher risk for you and the baby. And so that was terrifying for me. So I was like, oh my gosh, I really don't want to have a C-section because that's just terrifying. So I was already going into my labor, I don't want to go have a C-section. Mm-hmm. But then pretty much the whole pregnancy, I knew that I wanted a epidural. And so everybody was always asking me are you prepared to have birth? And my response would be well, he has to come out one way or another. So I don't care.
However that happens. Yeah.
But I wasn't educating myself. And I was watching a lot of YouTube videos, but I was watching what to pack in my hospital bag, which we'll get to that down the road. I was watching how to take care of a newborn the first month and all of these different videos, what you need, like what you should put on your registry. And it never dawned on me to research how, like, what to expect during labor. And so on June 2nd, I thought that I had went into labor because I thought that my water broke. And so I call my husband and I'm like, Jake, you need to get home right now. I literally my water broke all over the floor. I ran to the bathroom. I called my OBGYN. They were like, okay, come down to the hospital. And mind you, the hospital is about 40 minutes away that I had to deliver at because of my heart condition. Gotcha. And so we drove down and they asked me, they were like, are you having any contractions? And I was like, yeah, it was horrible. On the way down though, me and Jake made a video in our car. And I was like, we're going into labor. And both of us said in that video, I thought it was going to be a little bit more dramatic than that. And we were hoping for a little bit more drama. Like, so it's funny because they asked me when we went in, if I had been having contractions, and I was like, oh yeah, totally. Contractions like a couple minutes apart, whatever. So they tested me and they were like, it doesn't look like your water broke. And come to find out I had like peed myself, which was so embarrassing because we told everyone. We told our parents, we told our siblings, like everybody. And so I had to like retract that. I was like, actually, we didn't go into labor. And it just shows you how much your mind plays tricks on you because I wasn't having contractions. I was having minor Braxton Hicks. And if I would have known, what contractions actually felt like at that time, we wouldn't have been making the video because when I was actually in labor and Jake tried to take a video in the car the same way, and I was holding on to like the seat like this, and I was like, turn the video off, please. I'm just trying to concentrate.
Oh my goodness. But it's hard to know as a first-time mom because everything is new. You're experiencing it for the very first time. And so, it is like so many women go into the hospital thinking like, I think I'm having contractions. And it's like, no, those are Braxton Hicks. Like drink some water, lay down, like see if they'll go away.
Right. So, sorry about that. Where was I? I'm sorry.
So you had told your family that you hadn't actually gone into labor. So how much time between that and when you actually went into labor, and what did you do between that time when you realized like, oh, I don't know as much about birth as I maybe should?
Yeah. So that prompted me. I think that day or the next day, I had actually gotten onto YouTube and I was like, how do you know when your water breaks? How do you know when you're having a contraction? What do contractions feel like? And your videos kept on popping up. From that time where we went to the hospital the first time, I think that was June 2nd. And then I had him on June 15th. So,
Gotcha.
About a week and a half afterwards, we had actually had the baby.
Actually gone into labor.
Yeah, actually went into labor, which is funny because I didn't think that I was actually in labor. So I did. That's when I looked up your videos. I looked up like the phases, the 3 videos that you have on the 3 stages of labor. I looked up your breathing techniques. And after I saw that first video, I was like, oh my gosh, I got on your page and I literally just started like watching as many because let me backtrack a little bit. When I said that I knew that I wanted an epidural.
Yeah.
But I knew that I didn't want like any pain medication afterwards. I was like, I think that I can like deal with just Tylenol or ibuprofen. I didn't know if they like gave you pain medication or whatever. And then my husband was like, well, why don't you try to have a natural birth? And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like you're not giving birth to the baby. It's going to hurt really bad. And my pain tolerance is so low. I'm not going to be able to get through it. So that was pretty much my mindset my whole pregnancy. And then I think I'm a part of like a mom support group on Facebook, and somebody had posted something about like a complication that they had with the epidural where it like hurt their back. And that got me thinking, like, why would I put myself at risk, even if it's the smallest risk of having back problems for the rest of my life, where I could barely pick up my son, like, you know, all these different things, if women have been doing this since the beginning of time. So that kind of got me thinking, like, okay, I do want to have a natural birth, but I didn't know how to, and I didn't know what to research. So then that's when I thought that I had went into labor. And then after that, I was like, okay, I need to research to be able to get through this. And so that's when I found your videos, and I started just watching all day, every day for pretty much the 2 weeks. Now on June 15th at like 6:30 in the morning, my husband woke me up and he kissed me goodbye to go to work. And I was like feeling like I was cramping, but I was like, I don't think that this is actually labor. Like, I think it would hurt a little bit more if I were actually in labor. So I didn't want to mention anything to him because I didn't want him to get distracted throughout the day. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, bye, honey. Like, love you. So I got up and I was just having these like little contractions, but liquid would come out every time that I would have these like little contractions. And I was like, I'm peeing myself again. Oh my gosh. And I was just in this mindset where I was like, these aren't contractions, they're just cramps. I'm just peeing myself. And so finally at like, I think like I sat down on a towel and, you know, there was a little bit of blood coming out. And so I was like, maybe this isn't. And it kind of like got me thinking like, I don't know if I am. I don't know if I'm not. But I know if I call my OBGYN, they're just going to tell me to come in. So I'm just going to wait a little bit longer. And so finally at like 10:30 in the morning, I called my OBGYN and they were like, oh, I did. I was tracking the cramps between on this contraction tracker. And it popped up and it was like, oh, this is false labor. They're not consistent enough to go into the hospital. Cause they were like every 9 minutes, but then one would be like 18 minutes apart. Yeah. And they would be like anywhere from like 10 seconds to some would last like 60 seconds. And so it's just like, I didn't know when to press start and I didn't know when to finish. And I guess, I don't know. So I was like, I waited a little bit longer and then I called my OBGYN because they kept on happening every single time. A little bit more liquid would come out and a little bit more liquid would come out. And so they were like, well, you are in labor, it sounds like, and you need to come in now. And I was like, well, can I come in? Can we leave in like an hour and a half? Because I have to call my husband. He has to drive me there. Yeah. And they were like, no, I'd come in right now. And so I hang up the phone and I was like, I'm not going to come in right now. Yeah. I'm going to call my husband and let him know. So I call him and he was like, okay, let me wrap up everything. You called at the perfect time. Let's just clean up the area. Cause they do tree work. So they were like, okay. They had to clean up the client's property and then he had to drop his truck off and then he came home, which took about an hour. And in the meantime, the client that he was at the house, he was like, well, I have 3 kids. And since this is her first kid, she'll probably be in labor anywhere from like 15 to 30 hours. Yeah. And like, so don't
Which
rush.
Is pretty common.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was like not bad advice, but you never know you just never know.
I was only in labor for 7 hours for my first, which is, I mean, I am truly blessed because I know that so many women have such longer labors and mine was kind of just like textbook. And my sister-in-law is a doctor and she was like, oh my gosh, you're the perfect patient. Like the way that I was telling her the story. So
that's amazing.
Anyways, to backtrack, his client told him that. And so he comes home and he's just like kind of moseying and meandering around the house. And my contractions aren't bad enough. I was getting ready. I curled my hair. I did my makeup and did all that stuff because I knew that I wanted to labor at home for a long time. And I was trying to pass the time while I was waiting for him to come home.
So great. Yeah.
There was one that while I was curling my hair that like doubled me over. And I was like, okay, I need to sit down for this one.
Yeah.
And that's when I called him and I was like, I called him another time when that happened. And I was like, I'm definitely in labor. Like I've never felt a feeling like that before. So, he comes home and he's like moseying and meandering around the house and getting his bag ready and then like goes and walks the dog. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, honey, I think we need to go to the hospital. Like I've been in labor for now like 5 hours.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you said that you wanted to. And I didn't know his client had told him this while this was happening. He told me after. And he's like, well, you said that you wanted to labor at home for a long time before we went to the hospital. So like, don't you think that we should wait a little bit longer? And I'm like, fine. And so finally there was one, maybe like 30 minutes after he had already been home, I called him and I was like, I couldn't even get up. I called him and I was like, you need to get in the car right now. We're going to the hospital. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And so we get in the car and again, another 40 minutes to the hospital. The whole time I was like messing with the air. I was like, I wanted everything like a very particular way. And my car's really small. So we had the car seat in my car, but it was behind the passenger seat. And so I couldn't like bend it backwards. And that was so annoying. So I like took the headrest off and I like threw it across the car. And so I was like in so much pain. And that's when he tried to take the video of me. And I was like, please just shut it off. So I get to the hospital and normally with this COVID stuff, or without the COVID stuff, there's like valet at the front of the buildings at the hospital. But now that COVID is out and about, they kind of have like they have the valet guys sitting out front, but they can't actually take your car. So Jake had to drop me off at the front, and he wheeled me a wheelchair. But the valet guy was like, "I can't touch you. I can't like bring you in or anything." And meanwhile, Jake left and went and parked the car. And so I'm sitting on this wheelchair in labor, like, and then I start having a contraction, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm just sitting outside, like, people. This lady like dropped off her elderly mom, and she looks at me and she's like, "Honey, are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm in labor right now." And she's like, "Let me go inside and get somebody for you because like you look like you're in a lot of pain." So somebody came out, wheeled me in, they checked me in, they brought me up to labor and delivery. And there's like these security people that have to like buzz you into the door into labor and delivery. And they just, after we got off the elevator, they were like, again, meandering and like just talking and acting like everything was fine. And I'm
You're like, hello.
I know. I'm like, I don't think like, maybe I'm not like being dramatic enough. Like, I don't know why people aren't like listening to me. And then finally I started having another contraction because like between contractions, it's amazing. You feel like nothing is happening. And so, you know, I'm thinking like, okay, why aren't they like being a little bit quicker? But then I'm not in a contraction. So while I had that contraction, I looked around at everybody and it kind of like made me like my eyes kind of like, I don't know. I was just like, why are you all just standing here? Like, please just get me into the bed. Like, I just want to lay down. Why are you guys just standing here? And they started like busting out laughing. Meanwhile, I start crying.
Oh,
they start like wheeling me into the room and I just like throw up. And nobody ever told me about this part that like you just get really sick. And I guess it makes sense because I was in so much pain that I just got sick. And so they took me to the triage part. They put me up on the bed and they were like asking me all the questions, which Jake was answering. The doctor comes in that was on call and she goes, "Do you want an epidural?" And I was like, no, I really want to go natural. And she was like, well, they checked you and you're 5 centimeters. And she's like, you're halfway there, but are you sure you don't want an epidural? And I was like, no. And she kind of like laughs and she's like, okay. And then she comes back like 5 minutes later while I was in a contraction. And she's like, are you sure you don't want an epidural? And I was like, yes, order one right now. And I like totally broke down. And they put in the order for it. And then they took me to the room the delivery room. And meanwhile, they checked me again. They checked my cervix again. And I went from 5 centimeters to 9 centimeters in the amount of time that I was in the triage. Because in the triage, they checked me, I was 5. And then by the time that they put me in the room, I was at 9 centimeters.
Oh my goodness.
And the doctor was like,
fast.
Oh my gosh. She was like, okay, looks like you got your wish of a natural labor because your epidural isn't going to be able to if we give you an epidural, it's not going to kick in until after you have the baby. So there's no point of it. And so I was like, okay, you know what? Whatever. And so I'm just like sitting there. The only position that I wanted to be in was like with my knees bent. I was gripping my husband's hand with one hand, and then I had my hand like pushed up against my knee with my other hand. And I wanted a completely silent room, which is funny because I made a birthing playlist and I bought a JBL speaker to bring into the delivery room. So like I was all prepared. I wanted complete silence. I didn't want like anybody to talk. My husband kept on making jokes and I was just like, please shut up. Like, please shut up. So anyways, then after all that like chaos and everything kind of like relaxed, I was like trying to fight the contractions and I was like squirming and kind of like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I kept on saying, I can't do this. I can't do this. And then there were times where I was like, listen to Bridget, listen to her voice, breathe, Kastle, breathe. Like you can do this. You can do this, mama. You can just, this is like the worst part. It's going to go away. And I noticed whenever I was not trying to fight the contraction, I actually could get through it like a lot easier. And I really didn't feel a lot of pain because I was talking to myself and kind of distracting myself with like the affirmations and the breathing. And then after I realized that, I just did that the rest of the time. And I was at 9 centimeters for maybe like an hour and a half. And then finally, I started pushing. But during that hour and a half, it was like, I can't remember what you called it. I think it was like the transition where you have like back to back to back contractions. Like they don't feel like they stop. And so that was the time where I was in the labor room and I was just having these back to back contractions. And finally when like, I felt like I started progressing more after I had told myself, okay, listen to Bridget's voice. Like, I feel like I was preventing myself from dilating more from having like a squirmy and like a I can't do this kind of attitude. Yeah, exactly. Because like whenever I would have the affirmations, I felt like I was like picturing him like moving down a little bit more and moving down a little bit more and kind of just like thinking about your videos and then finally the nurse was like, okay, let's empty your bladder so that you can try to start pushing. Can you get up to go to the bathroom or we can insert a catheter? And I was like, well, how bad does the catheter hurt? Because I really can't get up right now. And she's like, it hurts really bad. So I was like, okay, I'll just get up. So Jake like picks me up by one arm and I walk to the bathroom and I sit down and I'm like, I'm about to push. And she goes, oh my gosh, no, don't have a toilet baby. Don't have a toilet baby. And so she picks me up. We like run as fast as we can back to the bed. I get back on the bed and I was like, I need to start pushing. So she was like, okay, do whatever your body tells you to do. And so I just start pushing. And I think I was pushing for like 30 minutes. And then she called the doctor and she's like, she's ready to go. And then I kept on, like, with every contractions, I was telling her when I wanted to push. She wasn't telling me.
That's
And
awesome.
I was like, I need to push. And finally it got to the point where, like, the doctor wasn't in the room yet. But she said, you need to stop pushing if you can, because you're about to have this baby and I'm fully capable of delivering him for you. But I would really rather if the doctor came in.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I tried to stop pushing. And then the doctor came in. The doctor literally, I think by the time that she came in and by the time that she left, I think maybe 5-10 minutes had gone by. Like,
Oh my
she was
goodness.
in and out. Like, we had the baby, and then I don't even, like, feel like I pushed to have the placenta come out, but, like, it came out. She checked me and she was like, all right, you're good to go. And the nurse was like, oh my gosh, that doctor is never impressed. And I can tell you right now, like, you impressed her completely. She was like, so while I was pushing, again, like, it was really cool because I was like, I can feel my body. I can feel when I need to push. And I was telling the doctor, like, when to push. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's burning. And they were like, it's the ring of fire. And then I remembered your video and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. His head's about to pop out. And then his head came out and then he just came out. And oh my gosh, it was like the most magical experience I have ever experienced in my life. I can't stop thinking about it. I felt so empowered. I was like, oh my gosh, I just did that. Like, I did that. I didn't tear it all, which I feel like I tell myself, like, if I would have gotten an epidural, like, I probably would have torn because I probably wouldn't have known, like, when to push. And like the doctors probably would have been telling me to push because I wouldn't have known. And so it was just really cool because it was like, I was made for this. Like, my body, like, I was put here on earth to, like, make babies.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, such a cool experience. Like, my body can do this. And I know that if I would have actually been going into labor on June 2nd, when I had actually peed myself, I probably wouldn't have been able to get it through it as quickly, as painlessly, and, like, just as it was just so smooth if I wouldn't have watched your videos. So thank you so much. I really, really, I share your videos with everybody that I know is pregnant. I'm like, watch these videos because if you want to do it natural, she is very informative, knows what she's talking about. And your voice is so calming.
Well, it just shows how much education plays into your empowering birth experience, you know, whether you have it medicated or unmedicated. But I think when you know what's happening in your body and why you're feeling those sensations, it makes it so it's like, it's not as scary, you know, where it's like you said, like, oh, I felt the ring of fire. And it's not like it was like, oh, this feels great, you know, it's not like that. But you said, oh, that's so cool because that means his head's about to be born, you know? And so it's like when you know those things, it makes you not be afraid of it because you're like, oh, I know that means, you know, those tissues are stretching and that means his head is right there and he's ready to be born. I know. And so it makes it so much more like, okay, I know what's happening. I don't need to be scared and I can actually appreciate the sensations that I'm experiencing because it means that my baby is coming to me.
Yeah, exactly. It was such a special, such a special time. And like, I remember thinking before they said the ring of fire, I was like, oh my gosh, this is totally a tearing sensation. Like, I feel like I'm tearing. And then she was like, no, this is this is what they call the ring of fire. And I was like, oh my gosh, oh, that's so cool. Like, I know that I'm like right there. Yeah. Because I felt like I had been pushing for like ever. But man, when you start pushing during those contractions, it's like a relief. Like, you're not in pain anymore. It actually feels good. Like, I didn't feel the contractions when I was pushing. I was just like,
yeah, it finally feels like, and I know every mom is different, but I feel like a lot of moms feel similarly where the pushing part, when you're able to listen to your body and go with that like urge to push. And I know a lot of first time moms, when they're like, what do you mean by the urge to push? Like, or the urge to bear down, they're like, what does that mean? But it's like, once you experience it, you just like can't deny it. Like, you're like,
I know,
oh, I can't fight this anymore.
I know. That's so crazy. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like just magical. Like your body just knows what to do and you're just along for the ride. Yeah. That's what it feels like.
Exactly.
It's so cool.
Yeah, and I love it. What do you feel like was one thing or a couple things that you learned while you were pregnant that you feel like really impacted your birth experience?
Well, honestly, like the most important was watching the three different stages of labor, and knowing when you're in like active labor and knowing when it's like transition. Oh, I forgot to mention, I knew, you know how you were talking about like the rest period that your body gives you right before you're about to push. I experienced that because I remember I remember having back to back contractions. And then there was this point where where I just laid my head down and I kind of like fell asleep for a second. And then I woke back up and then I started pushing again. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to need to start pushing, because my body is like I remember turning my head to the side and like being like, oh my gosh, I'm not in a contraction right now. How crazy. I feel like I've been contracting for like forever. And now my body's like giving me this time. And so that was super cool because I knew that I was about to start pushing. And then the other thing is knowing when you're in transition and you're having those back-to-back contractions, the breathing techniques, and the affirmations, because like when you're saying those to yourself in your head or even out loud, and telling yourself like, okay, this is the worst part. The contraction's going to end here in like a couple seconds, like just 3, 2, 1, like just counting to yourself, and you can get through it. And it kind of distracts you, but it also like empowers you and makes you realize that you're not in pain forever. It's just a temporary pain that you're going to get through, and you can get through. So that was super cool. And I mean, like, I didn't really prepare myself. Like, I didn't try to prepare myself to go into labor. I didn't like have to do any of like the positions to try to get him like, in the right position. He was already really low the whole pregnancy. Yeah.
Sounds like he was ready to be born.
Yeah. And I know that like you could do the perineum massage. I did that like a couple times, but not enough to actually help. Like I probably did it like 4 times, but that could probably help somebody out, is the perineum massage with like the oil. But definitely just like the affirmations. It's just crazy how much your mind can influence, like, I guess, I don't know, influence, like your mind really controls how your pain
so much
tolerance
of your body. Yeah. And your pain tolerance. Exactly. Yeah. And I think about that when we're working, like when we're working out or we're running, like, really it's our body. It's just one step in front of the other. It's lifting one more thing, it's one more yoga pose, but our brain is like, you got to stop, you got to take a rest, you got to do this, and there's, you have to balance it out, because you have to listen to your mind and your body, but you also, have to know that like your mind controls so much of your body. And when you're saying, oh, I can't do it, your body is going to respond to that. And it's going to say, oh, I can't do it. And it's going to stop.
Exactly. And it's crazy how much of my life this is actually affected. Like after I was able to have an all natural labor and get through it and see how my mind can play tricks on me and tell me that I can't when I actually can, like it empowered me so much. I'm like, I can do anything. And I literally like live my life now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to start saying more positive affirmations to myself. And, I can't work out yet because I'm not 6 weeks, but like after I'm able to work out, like I know that that'll help me, I'm going to have to go into it like with my mind right, because it really affects so much, and mind over matter. So it's so true.
Yeah. And I think that's so powerful for you to experience, but for moms to hear as well, as how impactful, it's not like your birth experience is just a one-day thing, but like you said, it's changed your life in ways that you didn't expect, and that's really, really cool. But that also puts a lot of weight on the birth experience, where you're like, you want to, as much as we want to know what to pack in the hospital bag and know how to take care of a newborn, of course, because that's so important. But all of those things, like, what to do in the car ride on the way to the hospital, all of those things. But then if you think about it, like, what you packed in the hospital bag probably does not impact how you live your life right now,
No.
But what you learned about your birth did impact your experience, and then it followed you beyond that experience as well.
Well, and I will say, I mean, I know that this doesn't apply to everybody. I didn't use a ding dang thing out of my hospital bag while I was in labor. I don't know if it's just because I was so far into it, but I didn't touch that thing until we got to the recovery room. And I think I wore the PJs that I packed in it, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I brought a big duffel bag.
Yeah, I think that's so true, though, because that was the same for me. That's true of a lot of moms. I feel like you really want to carefully pack your bag if you're being induced, because your hospital stay is going to be a lot longer. But I feel like for moms who go to the hospital or go to the birthing center when they're like in labor, you're like, I don't need it. Like, I don't care about the essential oils. I don't care about the jammies or the socks. Yeah.
I brought my heating pad. There were so many things. I brought Stress Fix lotion to help not stress me out.
Yeah. And I
so many
think
things.
If you were to have stayed at 5 to 6, 7 centimeters for hours and hours and hours, maybe you would have used those things. Who knows? So it's good that you did bring those things. You did have them on hand. But typically when labor is progressing very normally and quickly, you don't really need those things. So it's just kind of funny hearing that.
It is so funny. Yeah. And that is true, because I did, like I said, I know that my birth experience isn't like a lot of people's. I could have very well been in labor for a lot longer than I was. And I'm very blessed for only having a very, very short labor. And that's probably why I love it so much.
Yeah.
I came out of it and I was like, all right, babe, let's try for another one.
But it just shows you, I've heard conversations and been a part of births where mom's labor has been a few hours long and whose births have been several hours long. And they both walk away feeling the same way. And honestly, so cool. I think it's perception and the way you experienced it and the way that you were respected and listened to and you were able to meet your goals, things like that. And so I think because you were able to meet the goals that you wanted to and that you had the support that you had, at least towards the end, not so much towards the beginning with the valet leaving you outside the hospital. I'm like, why didn't you go in and get someone?
I don't know. I was so curious because I was like, why are you just sitting there? It was the same thing the whole time until they got me into triage. I was like, why is everybody just sitting here?
Yeah. Hello, I'm in labor over here. Oh man, that's so funny. Well, I love
it's so funny. It's a funny story looking back on.
Yeah, it is. It's great. And thank you for sharing it. I love the humor, but then also just the realness of your experience and, from the false labor of you thinking your water broke and you beat yourself.
We won't talk about that anymore.
Which you're not alone. Yeah. That'll just stay here. That'll stay between me and you and every other woman who's going to be listening to this.
Well, it's funny because I watched, I think, your first video of the podcast that you're doing with me, with everybody else, with your best friend, I think.
Yeah,
and
Tess.
She said, I was watching that video and she pretty much had the same kind of timeline story as I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's not just me. Thank you. So I did want to make sure to mention it, no matter how embarrassing it is, because I know that other mamas out there will probably experience.
Yeah. For sure. So thank you for being a little bit vulnerable and being very honest and sharing your
Thank
experience
you.
with us. Is there one thing, just to kind of end our time here together, is there one thing that you would like to share with mamas who are listening to your story right now?
I would just say that just be really nice to yourself, and your body is made for this. Just tell yourself that you can do it no matter how much you don't think that you can, because you can get through it. You're going to get through it no matter how your journey goes. And maybe don't be opposed to, needing an epidural or needing a C-section. Kind of just go into it with all options, or if anything's necessary, then, just with a really open mind, and just know that you guys can do it, because if I can with a really low pain tolerance, then you guys can too.
I love it. That's great. And that's encouraging and good advice. So thank you so much again for being here with us and sharing your story with us. Best of luck with this newborn stage. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work too, I'm sure.
I'm just so in love with him. I'm like, please. Well, today was the first really busy day because I just went back to work. And so it was super busy. But I'm just like, wake me up in the middle of the night, please. I love hanging out with you. I love spending time with you. The way that he looks at me, and he just started smiling, and it's just so beautiful. I get so overly emotional. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm a mom.
Yeah, but it is so special.
But thank you so much for having me on here. It's I feel just thank you. I'm so glad that I'm able to be on this call to just thank you in person, because and I'm glad that I was able to get your email, because I'm just I'm such an advocate for you. And I really believe that educating yourself going into labor is amazing. And you're definitely the one to be educated, or to give the education. Your voice is so calming. But thank you.
Well, thank you. Of course. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope that as you're beginning work too, that everything goes smoothly with that, and that
thank you.
Yeah, you just enjoy this newborn season.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Bridget. Have a great day.
Bye. You too.
Bye-bye.
Well, Mama, I hope you laughed and learned something as you listened to Kathleen's birth story. If you want to learn more about the stages and phases of labor, which Kathleen talked a lot about, which tools and techniques you can use throughout each stage of labor to help your labor be easier and more effective, and you want to learn how to use your mind to guide your body in the direction that you want it to go, I encourage you to go check out my Built to Birth online course at builttobirth.com, which is linked in the description below of this video. Kathleen talked a lot about using her affirmations and control over her breathing to help her manage transition. So if you want to get your hands on your own affirmation meditations, you can download the Built to Birth meditations at builttobirth.com/shop, which is also linked in the description below. Mama, like Kathleen said, you can do this. You are built to birth, and I hope you remember that each and every day until you meet your sweet little baby. So thanks for being with me in this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, mamas.